Hello, welcome. Welcome to one of our installments of a new model of the authentic church. First, I just want to say thank you for those that have viewed the video and also given some constructive suggestions as to how we should go about doing this, some of the camera angles, and so forth. So I'm very grateful that you took the time to watch the video, but also make suggestions that are helpful as far as making it more appealable for people to watch and take part of this YouTube series. I did want to mention I was contacted by my editor, James Abro, who worked with me on this project and encouraged much of the project before it was even started to write a book and to put things on paper and to share what was going on, what we're doing in our church with others, not only in the community but across the nation. So I do want to mention James Abro, and I'm very grateful for the help and encouragement he's given in this wonderful project. So one of the logistical issues that I think we have to deal with is that we're only able to do 15 minutes at a time on YouTube. I understand that there's other ways to go about expanding that time period, and we're working on that now. But what I plan to do is I plan to start just reading the book in 15-minute increments, and I will try to number them. That way you can follow in a chronological order, so you don't hear or follow chapter 3 before you're done with chapter 1. So I anticipate starting with chapter 1 today, probably concluding in 2 videos, chapter 1, and then we'll go on to chapter 2, 3, and so on. So initially we were only going to have 14 or 15 videos, but because of the time limitations, in all likelihood, that may double. But it may work out well anyway, so that way you don't have to watch it for such a long period of time, but rather take it in small increments and really digest some of the things that we're talking about. So without further ado, I'm going to begin chapter 1 of the book, and it is entitled The Decline of the American Church. To the angel of the church in Sardis, write, these are the words of him who holds the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your deeds. You have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have not found your deeds complete in the sight of my God. Remember, therefore, what you have received and heard, obey it, and repent. But if you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what time I will come to you. And this is Revelation chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. Before you begin this book and this first chapter, let me advise you of a disclaimer. In this book, we are attempting to formulate a new paradigm of how church should and ought to be done in the new millennium. In order for us to be successful in attempting to develop this new paradigm of the authentic church, we must take a cold, hard look at the status and condition of the American church. This chapter compiles data from well-researched surveys of where the church is now and data of its future or trends. It may read laborious, but it is important to have a working knowledge with raw data of the church, attendance, associations, belief, and a breakdown in demographics, geographical areas, race, age, denominations, and also a group called the nuns. With that data, we're able to look at the American church and be more able to formulate a model to bring lasting change and relevancy to the authentic church. This directive may be more relevant now than it was to the early church at Sardis. One of the foundational issues that has to be addressed is, where is the American church now? We need to answer this question first to know where we are in order to evaluate the church's effectiveness in society today. You might not be surprised that Brazil is the #1 receiving nation of foreign missionaries in the world, but you might be surprised about who is number 2. Most missionary receiving nation in the world. It is the United States. Of the 250,000 Protestant churches in America, 200,000 are either stagnant with no growth or declining. That is 80% of the churches in America. 3,000 American churches close their doors every year. 6,000 Americans leave the church each and every day. Since 1950, there are a third fewer churches in the U.S. The U.S. is the number 2 receiving nation of foreign missionaries, and perhaps now you can see why. Churches in America are declining and may be following the trend that has been occurring in Europe in recent years. The church in America is in desperate need of revival, but where does revival start? Revival should not be an appeal to those outside of the church. Nowadays, we can't pitch a tent and put up a sign saying revival tonight, although I've tried to do that. Revival is not for the lost, but rather for the church. Then it spreads to the lost. The church is the only place that revival can begin. If you're standing in the sand, draw a circle around yourself, and inside of that circle is where revival must first begin. Once we understand the conditions of the church and ourselves, we can then begin to formulate a solution. Christianity started out strong in America, but has the church lost its effectiveness and relevancy in our society and culture today? The colonies were relatively unchurched, but European visitors to the early republic marveled at Americans' fervent piety. Alex de Tocqueville wrote in 1840 that the absence of an established state church nurtured a society in which Christian sects are infinitely diversified and perpetually modified. But Christianity itself is a fact so irresistibly established that no one undertakes either to attack or defend it. De Tocqueville visited during a wave of religious revival, but he underestimated the degree to which some Americans held Christianity at arm's length. Nevertheless, America's rates of church affiliation have long been higher than those of Europe, perhaps because of the First Amendment, which permitted a religious free market that encouraged innovation and competition between spiritual entrepreneurs. Yet membership, as every exasperated pastor knows, is not the same as showing up on Sunday morning. Rates of church attendance have fluctuated and recently have shown a decline. Before the Civil War, regular attendance probably never exceeded 30%, rising to a high of 40% around 1965 and declining to under 30% in recent years, even as 77% still identify themselves as Christians and 69% say they are very or moderately religious, according to a 2012 Gallup poll. Christianity as a label is the largest religion in the world. Over 2 billion people can be counted as Christians. Their actual practices, beliefs, and lifestyles are another matter entirely. The West is responsible for Christianity's expansion around the world since the late medieval period. Ironically, it was the scientific and industrial advancements of the West that enabled the label of Christianity to spread, while nevertheless causing the substantive religion to shrink in significance. Christianity is defined as the major world religion that includes beliefs such as the virgin birth and resurrection of Jesus Christ, a personal God, the second coming of Christ, and the need to accept Jesus as one's personal Savior for salvation. This will also be referred to as traditional Christianity to distinguish it from newer sects and denominations. The United States is among the most religious societies in the world, developed world that is. Yet the hold of traditional Christianity on people's lives has been significantly eroded, even among people who call themselves Christian. General belief in God has remained high and stable in the U.S. since World War II, ranging from 92 to 98%. However, depending on the poll's question wording, belief in God declines notably. In 2010, 80% of the people said they believe in God, while 12% believed in a universal spirit. In 2006, 73% of Americans said they were convinced God exists, and 19% said God probably exists, but they have some doubt. From 1948 to 2008, the self-reported Christian population of America fell from 92% to 78%, and the non-religious population rose from 2% to between 13 and 15%. Non-believers have mostly come from the ranks of Christian defectors. Over the last 40 years, Americans have attended church less and less frequently. In 1972, the majority attended religious services once a month or more frequently. In 2008, a majority attended several times a year or less often. When asked, 40 to 45% of Americans claim they attend church weekly. However, actual weekly church attendance is estimated at somewhere between 10 and 30%. The majority of Americans do not attend church regularly. So why is this? These are the questions that we're trying to understand in order to rectify. Is Christianity in decline in America? When you examine the numbers, it is simply not possible to come to any other conclusion. Over the past few decades, the percentage of Christians in America has been steadily declining while populations are growing. This has especially been true among young people. There has been a mass exodus of teens and young adults out of U.S. churches. In addition, what Christianity means to American Christians today is often far different from what Christianity meant to their parents and their grandparents. Millions of Christians in the United States simply do not believe many of the fundamental principles of the Christian faith any longer. This is the most significant reason why there needs to be a reestablishment of Christocentric theology in which the Bible is taught at local community churches. A strong Christology is the antidote that must be affirmed and taught in order to combat this theological lethargy. Without a doubt, America is becoming a less Christian nation. This has staggering implications for the future of this country. It could be argued that the United States was founded primarily by Christians that were seeking to escape religious persecution. For those early settlers, the Christian faith was the very center of their lives, and it deeply affected the laws that they made and the government structures that they established. So what is the future of America going to look like without a Christological understanding of the world and humanity? Christianity is not in danger of disappearing anytime soon, but it is certainly not growing or expanding as it has in the past, especially in America. Has the message lost its appeal, or are the messengers ill-equipped to proclaim the message? Probably it's a combination of both. In some areas of the globe outside the United States, Christianity is experiencing explosive growth. But in the United States, things are different. Churches are shrinking, skepticism is growing, and apathy about spiritual matters seems to be at an all-time high. Just consider the following quote from a recent USA Today article. The real dirty little secret of religiosity in America is that there are so many people for whom spiritual interest, thinking about ultimate questions, is minimal, says Mark Silk, professor of religion and public life at Trinity College. This is backed up by the numbers. For example, a survey taken last year by Lifeway Research found that 46% of all Americans never think about whether they will go to heaven or not. To most Americans, faith is simply not a big deal. This is particularly true of our young people. Those under the age of 30 are leaving U.S. churches in droves. The following comes from a recent CNN article. David Kinnaman, the 38-year-old president of the Barna Group, an evangelical research firm, is the latest to sound the alarm. In his new book, You Lost Me, Why Young Christians Are Leaving Church and Rethinking Faith, he says that 18 to 29-year-olds have fallen down a black hole of church attendance. There is a 43% drop in Christian church attendance between the teen and early adult years, he says. We'll continue on in the next video, Chapter 1.